Welcome to the Sales Leadership Awakening podcast, where we work each week to bring you ideas and concepts to bridge that ever-going challenge of bridging the knowing and doing gap in the sales leadership world. I'm Colleen Stanley, and joining me today is my co-host, Steven Rosen. Steven, I know we have a fun topic, at least we think it is, on the docket today. What is that?
We're going to talk about one of the biggest changes post-COVID is sales reps are just not getting off their butts to visit clients. Before we even go there, and I've thrown this in to make Colleen's life fun, but I want to congratulate Colleen on being named the #1 sales professional guru for 2024 from Global Gurus. I know she's very humble about it. Congratulations and well-deserved, Colleen.
Thank you. That is very gracious of you to acknowledge that.
Congratulations, and I think it's worth acknowledgement. I'm sorry I put you on the spot, but I got to have a little bit of fun in the morning. So where are we at? Okay, so I am so passionate about this subject. I think with some organizations, they're really missing the boat. And maybe I can just set it up a little bit. If we go back, and it wasn't that long ago that we were in the midst of COVID. I remember the focus of COVID was, how do we keep our people safe? How do we adjust ourselves so we can still be in the business of selling in this new world? And of course, many sales reps fought and screamed and yelled, I hate Zoom. This is the worst thing. I can't be close to my clients. I don't know how to present with this. This is new technology. We suffered through 2.5 years of COVID, and for all intensive purposes, I don't want to start with vaccines. It's not a threat to our lives anymore. And it hasn't been for at least, I don't know, maybe a year. We can go about our regular business. But interestingly enough, some folks have just settled into a wonderful world of doing their communication and their sales through Zoom, Teams. So Colleen, let's dive in. I want to get your perspective. What do you think the main reason that sales reps have been reluctant to return to face-to-face selling? Please share with our audience what your thoughts are. Is the reluctance, the resistance, or the lack of getting off your butt and going out and selling?
If I would put it under some of the terms we use in the emotional intelligence world, this would fall under emotional self-awareness. And underneath that competency is examining your belief systems, right? We all know that what you believe becomes your truth, which drives your actions or inactions. I really think for sales leaders, even though this might sound like a soft topic, address what is your salesperson's belief systems about face-to-face meetings and the importance of those, because belief systems are developed a number of ways. It's authority figures, what you read, what you listen to, and for our conversation today, who you hang with. So if you're hanging around other sales professionals that are rationalizing, saying, Stephen, nobody wants to meet face to face anymore. My customers are all comfortable through video calls. Now, in some cases that can be true, but I have to tell you, the research is not backing that up, and common sense. For example, HubSpot, who always does a lot of pretty good research, shows that 65% of customers, consumers, still prefer a face-to-face meeting. Now, let's put some guardrails around that. If you've got a really transactional product, frankly, you probably don't need a high-powered salesperson like you, okay? But so let's be clear on that. If it's really transactional where it can be self-serve, but if it's something complex, it's a little bit intricate, it's the first time they purchased it, the research is showing I want to have a face-to-face with you. So I believe you've got to really look at that belief system, because going back to COVID, I found a lot of our colleagues, Stephen, and we're supposed to be the sales gurus out there. I was hearing this belief system. Oh, prospects won't run any longer than a 20-minute call during COVID. They just don't want it. Well, I don't know about you, but my belief system was, if they're serious about solving a problem, I'm scheduling 45 minutes, and they usually ran over to an hour. What was directing those conversations? It was my belief system, okay? Now, the second one here, I would say, is something called WORK, work. And under, again, the EQ umbrella, this is called reality testing. And reality testing is that ability to see things as they are versus how you want them to be. You know what, Stephen? I now work in a virtual office. I've had the office space for years. It's nice. If I want to in Colorado, I can take a hike right in the middle of the day. The fact is, my customers want me back out in the field. The minute COVID lifted, my virtual trainings dropped to almost zero, and I'm back on a plane, I'm back in a car. It's called work. And so what? Because when you use the term competitive advantage, most people I've seen in life will not do the work that it takes to be highly successful. If you're getting back on planes, getting back in cars, guess what? It's a competitive advantage. So those 2 points, belief systems and guess what? It's work. Mhm.
I'm with you. And I think there's a partial truth here that you can do effective calls via online. We've all learned that this is a great way to communicate, but it's not necessarily slam dunk to make your numbers. I come from not a very different perspective, but you mentioned the key word competitive advantage. And I simply look at it is if your competitors are starting to visit your clients or are already visiting your clients and you're not, you've got a problem. You're at a competitive disadvantage. Competitors are on their butts. You're visiting, then you're at a competitive advantage. If you're both visiting them, it's equal playing field, but you're not stuck behind the computer screen. You're very kind. You say it's work. I say sometimes it becomes laziness. We take the path of least resistance.
We've gotten a little bit lazy and we had to hunker down during COVID. Well, it's over. And so you've got to establish the new habits. And it is a new habit and maybe a new way of time management and planning your calendar. I was actually doing a little research for our conversation today, and her name is Renee Siegel. I think I've got the name right. And she's the CEO of Connects out in Silicon Valley. She runs a marketing communications firm. So you think of Silicon Valley, technology hub. And she said, we just need to remind everybody, regardless of what type of business you're in the people business. This is great. It doesn't mean we eliminate this, but it does mean we need to get back to the face to face, which leads me to this question. Stephen, what, in your opinion, can sales leaders do to encourage their salespeople to embrace getting back out and having the face to face conversations? Any thoughts?
Well, I have to say your question is a very kind question and you're a very kind person. I mean, encourage could have different connotation. I'll come in from a more emotionally mature perspective. I know it's hard, but I'll work to get there. Some of it's setting expectations. If everyone's fine doing business a certain way, I don't blame the rep for not saying, hey, I'm going to continue doing business this way. Everybody else is. I think it's incumbent upon leadership, if that's what they want, if that's what the customers want, to say, hey, guys and gals, we've survived COVID. If God forbid it rears its ugly head again, we know how we can run our business. Now's the time to be out there. In Canada, we have long winters. I love to get out of the house and meet with clients. I have one client who says, can you do this virtually? So the reluctance, I think we've become socialized into this, and I'm trying to dig deep here. But to me, encouraging is nice. And I think encouraging is when someone goes out and sees a client, that's great. You want to reward that, acknowledge that. But to me, it's almost setting the expectations that you are salespeople. Your employment contract says that you should be out there 50% of the time. I think back to days just to myself, and I'm very passionate about this one. I used to go visit some clients in Montreal, a client that there's a variety of decision makers there. So what I do is one, I try to book as many appointments as I can on one day or on 2 days and see as many of the folks in that organization as I can. In between scheduled calls, I'd go down to the cafeteria, grab a coffee, grab lunch if they didn't throw me out, because I'd say I have a meeting coming up, but I'd run into people. On Zoom, you don't run into people, right? The people I couldn't see, if for whatever reason were busy, would sit down and have a coffee with me. If you're dealing with accounts that have multiple buyers, multiple people who are involved in your decision, multiple deals going on, being there is great. There's some real advantages to doing that.
You're reminding me of a funny story, at least I think it is. So I was interviewing a friend of mine, and she's very good at major account selling. And I'm good at systemizing materials. And like I said, she's working with the American Airlines of the world, GE. So these are big companies. And I said, tell me about your decision making process. What are the steps and stages? She looked at me and she goes, well, I don't know if I've really got a process. I get into the company and then I just walk up and down the hall. She was like, okay, come on, give me the real thing. But she's a high relationship person, a very good critical thinker. But it's just what you say. You don't run into people unless it's somebody walking behind the Zoom that probably shouldn't be here. Yesterday, I had a client reach out to me a couple weeks ago. We not worked together for a few years, but they've now got some new sellers on board. They want to learn more about EQ. It would have been very easy to set up just a Zoom call. You know what? Made the drive there. Guess what happens? We reconnected. Then he walks me around the office, introduces me to people. There's a lot of rapport building that goes on there.
There's the tremendous benefits, and I don't want to use the term again, but I will, to get off your butt. Zoom is great if you've conquered doing Zoom meetings and presenting on Zoom. Great. That's one more tool in your toolbox. But as you said, we're in the people business. Any other benefits that you can think of to being in the customer's location, maybe even breaking bread with the customer?
Oh, absolutely. I think what we want to forget, we read it, but then we don't want to believe it. Human beings are wired to connect. And in fact, I wish I had cut this picture out a few years ago in the paper. And it was where all the world leaders were together. I can't remember which summit it was, but I remember distinctly, Stephen, sitting there looking at that picture thinking, huh, imagine the money, the time that they're taking out of busy schedules. They could have done this on a video call, but they got together. Human beings are wired to connect. Now, the biology behind this is literally when you connect, it's easier to be empathetic, empathetic listening, which builds trust and rapport. So you actually start releasing what you call bonding hormones, oxytocin. There's actually a chemical reaction that is happening easier when you're face to face. We all talk about trust is the foundation of relationships. Well, guess what? That's biology 101. And if we're in the same room together, I can also read the room better. I can pick up more. See, on a video call, we're supposed to be looking at that camera. That's what we're taught to do. But then you could be missing some nonverbals from the other people in the meeting. I would say the second thing, and I'm sure you've had this happen, where when you're in a meeting, it's just easier to do collaboration and creation. At this point, most of our buyers are pretty smart. So I always tell them, we've got to co create the solution here. I'm going to come in with my expertise, but you got a boatload of it. It's harder to do that on a Zoom or a video call. It just naturally that collaboration, creativity starts happening, which I believe arrives at a better solution. And again, bonding rapport and trust. Those are a couple of benefits that I see. The breaking bread, talk a little bit about that.
Maybe it's my ethnic background, but I always find when you sit down for lunch, and lunch can be very conversational, always a great way to build a relationship. Certainly having coffee together is great, but there's nothing like a lunch or a dinner to get to know somebody and to really find out what their issues are because you leave from the work environment in most cases, right? You're out one on one. All of a sudden, there's no hierarchy. You're two people enjoying each other's company. You find a lot more some of those evenings, or maybe there's a bit of wine drank or consumed. Some of those guards come down and you get people to open up and in some ways create bonding memories. So we had a great dinner at Gibby's or wherever the case may be, right? It's almost like if I can use the word shameful, it's shameful if you're not taking advantage of the opportunities to meet face to face.
Right. And here's what I observe happening, and it's still a bad habit that sellers have, is that with the video calls, for some reason, they just tighten it up and they were back to back to back to back, right? There's no relaxation, there's no extra time for conversation. So when you are out to dinner, what happens is you're off the clock and you can relax and the conversation isn't forced because that's when it almost on that 30-minute tight call, which again, I don't know why people are scheduling back to back. I like to have conversations and mine go longer than that. Again, belief system and scheduling. But if you just got this business call, we're not getting into the deeper. I might learn about your family. I might learn about a hobby, or we're just laughing our heads off about something like a TV series that we both enjoy. That doesn't happen just on a purely business call there. I think you're absolutely right. I'm going to ask you a question, but you just reminded me of a story here where I recently had an engagement where I happened to have two dinners with the sales team I was working with. It built for a great day of rapport because we'd already gotten to know and turn over dinner the next day. Here's what's interesting. I'm speaking at a conference where their team is also going to be attending. The president reaches out to me and says, "Hey, what day are you getting in? Because we're coming in on Sunday and we always like to make that a fun day. And if you're in, we'd like to invite you to join us." I'm not doing any business with them at this conference. I'm hired by the association. That's what happens when you build relationships. With that, I like the fact that you challenged me on using that word encourage because you're right. This is where we've got to set expectations. And the expectations is we're here to serve the client. If it is best for us to serve the client being face to face for trust rapport building, collaboration, this is the way we roll now. With that, one of the excuses I've heard is that customers are too busy to see us. I think the reason people get too busy to see you, it's not valuable to waste their time. This is a point where I got to get a return on my investment. What can sales leaders do to make sure that when their reps do show up to those face to face because they set the expectation, this is the new world? How do you maximize the return? How do you make it relevant for both parties? Any ideas?
One of the things that triggers because we're talking to this message is to sales leaders, to their salespeople. But I also think sales leaders need a bit of a wake up call here, where if their sales reps are not visiting clients, it means they're not visiting clients. Maybe we need to encourage them a little bit to say, hey, once every month, I'm going to come out with you out of your office to go visit clients. Let's plan a day, because the most powerful thing leaders can do is be out there and coach. And the most powerful form of coaching to me is observational. Yes, you can observe a Zoom call, but again, all the same benefits that you described and we bantered around in terms of the sales leader getting out and meeting clients and being in those meetings, not only to build rapport, not only to move the sale forward, not only to have competitive advantage, but to be able to see how the rep does. How are their selling skills? Did they bring value? So to answer your question, which I get an answer, to me, it comes back to basic selling. We just have to rewind the clock here back to pre-COVID days where we were doing this and doing this, that this was the only way we did business. How do we bring value to clients? Oh, we're making sure our reps bring value, especially in the space that I've worked in, the pharmaceutical area, where reps may show up and throw up as opposed to bring value to the physician. This is our sales aid. We're going to talk to you about this today, doctor. Did you know that? Blah, 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 blah. That's not selling, but a lot of companies have gone that route. But to me, it comes back to fundamentals. And what we're talking about is fundamentals of reps being out in the field, reps bringing value, reps using effective selling skills. But as you say, the first step is encouraging them to get out in the field. You're going to hit more home runs when you get up to bat than if you're sitting in the dugout on Zoom.
I really like the point you're making that we've got to model the behavior we expect because I was a regional manager before I became a VP of sales. I had 18 direct reports as a regional sales manager because we were a startup. We were all field reps at the time. So I was in a car a lot. I can tell you, besides the observation that'll happen, which is great, it was relationship building. So we all talk about how can we retain our top people? Belonging is a big way that people remain with companies. You know how you do it? You get out there and you spend time with them. I remember I was riding with my rep in Indiana. Julie is her name, and we had several appointments booked. And we had done a lot of talking and all that. And then we're just having a quiet moment. All of a sudden, she hit a set of railroad tracks, and we both just went, whoa. We had laughed about that for the next 20 years, just goofy things like that. I'm traveling with a rep in Kansas, and she invited me to her home for dinner, and her husband had cooked dinner. You get to know your rep. That ties into retention. What's important to them? What's their life like? I love the coaching aspect of it, but model the behavior we expect. So if we expect to build trust with our customers, you've got to do the same behavior. If you don't have 18 direct reports, you have no excuse for not getting out there and traveling with your reps.
If you think of it, the advantage with the reps, the advantage with the customers like to see leaders too. They like to meet the company, who the decision makers are with the company. The benefits we've laid out a case here that if someone is listening to this and their reps are not out, stop listening to the podcast and call your reps and tell them to get out in the field.
Maybe that's what they've got to do is you need to take a look at your activity plan. This needs to be a number set each month, whether it's new business acquisition, client retention. And I like your idea. Let's rewind because a lot of the fundamentals still work. We can keep grabbing the new technology comes out, the new ways of selling, but the fundamentals generally, because they do involve people and people management and rapport building, those aren't going away. It is, again, biology 101.
We shared so many insights here. If we haven't inspired folks who are listening to get off their butts and see a client, have lunch with a client, stay in the client's office, is there anything else, Colleen, that you want to share that will inspire folks if we haven't done so already?
I love Denzel Washington's quote, the famous actor. The quote he was given by his father was, Denzel, do the work so you can do the work. I read this, I think it was in an interview or something, and I didn't quite understand it in the beginning. If you think about it, if you'll do the work of going out and having the face to face meetings, whether it's a sales leader with your rep or the salesperson with their client, what it allows you to do is the work that becomes fun. Once you've established a relationship, it becomes repeat business. You still need to be relevant. You still need to be building value, But because you did the upfront work, you get to enjoy that wonderful thing in the sales profession called business friends, business relationships. It becomes easier. So I would say follow Denzel Washington's advice. Do the work so you can do the work.
Great insight, great quote. I'm going to keep it simple. My insight is if you want to crush your numbers, if you want to at the end of the year be on the podium, you know what you have to do. If the new habit of doing Zoom became the old habit of doing Zoom, it's time to break that habit. Use that tool where it's necessary, but there is no better impact than being face to face with your client, with your sales rep. I'm trying to think of a quote. If it's to be, it's up to me. If you want to be a star, get off your butt. Colleen, this was fun. I think there's an important message here, and we hope that the folks who are listening have gathered some very insightful strategies, reasons why to encourage their teams and encourage themselves to get off their butts and visit their clients. So if you're listening, we've been very excited, very passionate, and we're building a community here. If you like this discussion on face-to-face selling, if you found it insightful, don't forget to subscribe to our podcast. We're out there every week offering what I think is some great insights that can help you in a very short period of time grow your business. So if you're working out and you want to listen to something that's inspiring and awakening, I suggest that you subscribe to the podcast. You put likes down, you share the podcast, get the word out there because we're here to bring you some great insights and it's very easy. Any platform that you like, we're on. Colleen, thank you and congratulations once again.
Thank you.